Greetings and welcome to another episode of I Survived Youth Group in the 90s. I am your host, Scott, and with me as always is my talented co-host, Caleb. Caleb, how are you tonight? It is cold outside, I will not lie. I'm a hardy Minnesotan, but I am upset about how cold it is.
Yeah, I hadn't left the house in like a day and a half, so I was like, I just had to go pick somebody up, and I was like, holy cow, it's cold.
Yeah,
so.
I'm glad you got home because you would have died. But
yeah.
We are, of course, back again to talk about the experience growing up as youth group kids in the 90s and how that has shaped our adult lives. We'll talk to old friends about their faith journeys spanning from the 90s to today and discuss current cultural topics through the lens of someone who grew up during that era. Caleb, tell us, who is our guest for this episode?
Yeah, today we were joined by, or for this episode, we were joined by Pam. She goes by Hovering Girl on Twitter. I think that's the handle she uses. But yeah, she's somebody I met on Twitter, just talking about music. How it seems to be like 95% of the people I know on Twitter are through random music connections. But yeah, so that's how we got to know each other. And she's been a faithful listener of the podcast for quite a while, actually.
It's something I never thought we would have, somebody who listens all the time. That's not our mothers. She listens more than our moms. Pam does.
Way more. Shame, Mom.
Yeah,
Shame.
She likes us more than our moms do. So
that's true.
No, we had a good time talking with Pam. She had a really interesting story which we'll hear, of course, in a few minutes. You know, what really struck out to me was she had a little different experience, not really having too much of a youth group home until towards the end. She kind of did youth group a little bit in reverse, and that's as much as I want to reveal about that, but it kind of impacted her experience having it done that way.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And yeah, it was an interesting, still very involved in Christian culture, which we've had a couple of people like that who it's like the youth group is less consistent as ours, but yet still very involved in some sort of Christian culture. So definitely still, in that environment in the 90s.
Yeah, you'll hear how she jumped around for various reasons and how it was really her mom who was pushing it. At one point in the small little town they lived in, her mom was going up and down just wanting to find not just a friend for her daughter Pam, but a Christian friend, which they actually found. And it was a sweet, endearing story, and ultimately it's the faith of her mom that kind of keeps Pam grounded, even though a lot of things have changed for Pam, which you'll hear. She really holds on to that experience of faith with her mom, through her mom, and that's one of the reasons she can't ultimately be like, hey, I'm out of here completely. Yeah. And I thought the way that she described that was pretty eloquent, so really compelling part of the story.
Yeah, for sure.
Pam, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you very much for listening.
Yeah.
We thank you to everyone who continues to listen. We're having a good time with this, and we continue to record and make episodes, so there's plenty more to come. If you do want to be a guest on the show, please do reach out to us. But at any rate, thank you, Pam, for being with us for a couple hours here, and we really enjoyed talking to you. Hope you enjoy.
I want to break in and quickly remind everyone that the views and opinions expressed on this episode of I Survived Youth Group in the 90s may not be held by or even approved of by everyone appearing on this episode. One of the goals of this show is to give everyone a safe space to share their opinions and thoughts on deeply personal matters of faith. We are not looking to start an argument, but instead we want to let people share how they feel. During our interviews and discussions, we may not represent every point of view on a given subject, and we understand that this may be frustrating at times, but it is the nature of a podcast discussion with a limited amount of time. We also know and want to acknowledge that our memories of events that happened 25 to 30 years ago may not be 100% accurate. We assume everyone's best intentions as they share how they remember the experience of their youth. Now, back to the show.
Okay, we are joined tonight with our new friend Pam. Pam is actually an avid listener, something I never thought we would find or have on this show. Pam, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate you being here.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to talk about these things.
Great, great. The excitement is going to make for a great episode, I'm sure. So yeah, if you've listened to a lot of this, you know where we like to start. It's not there's really no better place to start than from the beginning. So tell us, where did you grow up? Did you grow up in a Christian home? How was church involved with your family? That sort of thing. Kind of bring us from childhood up into your teenage years.
We moved a lot when I was a kid. My parents met in Virginia, and then my dad got a job with the federal government. And so we had
Mm,
to move states for him to get promoted. So we moved from Virginia, North Carolina, Adirondacks of New York, Catskills of New York. We lived in New Jersey. And then we finally ended up in Northeast Pennsylvania by the time I was about to turn 13 in 1991. My mom was a very devout Christian. My dad was kind of a Christian. He had read the whole Bible and became a Christian as an adult. Like, neither of them grew up with Christianity in their homes.
mm,
They were a part of the New Covenant Church back in Virginia, late 70s, mid 70s.
mm-hmm,
And with all the moves, we never really had a solid church home. So my mom would just try to take us to a church in town that she felt was a Bible believing church.
mm.
I've been to a lot of different denominations. I figured out from the New Covenant, I had to pick my dad's brain the other day. It's like, what did we actually believe? What was our actual religion? Yeah. So it was kind of a mix of Baptist and charismatic. Just hard to find churches like that when you're on the move.
Yeah, no kidding.
My mom didn't drive for a long time, and so a lot of times it would be places we could walk to. My dad really didn't go to church, but it was such an important part of my mom's life and our life with me and my sister growing up, that that's what we did. We found churches and bounced around and did the best we could.
Mm-hmm. What was the longest stretch you'd ever be at a church?
It would not be long. Would not be long at all. Maybe a year.
Wow.
Yeah, as a solid, this is our home church. Even when we moved to Pennsylvania, and that's what I consider my home, even though I didn't move there till I was 12. We lived there for I lived there for about 6 years, but my mom is buried there, and this is where I feel like my roots are. But even then, we went to multiple churches. That all went to different youth groups, and
Interesting. So even after you settled, it was still kind of in the mode that what you operated on was, let's just, move around a little bit.
kind of. I know I've been trying to piece together this, but my mom didn't drive for a long time, and then my dad didn't go to church. And so it depended a lot on who we could get rides with sometimes.
Oh.
And, when we were very rural, that was probably the most rural place we had ever lived. We lived down in a valley. One of the churches was like way on top of the mountain. And
Mm.
so trying to find a ride sometimes a little bit complicated. So then we would try to find churches closer. Then they weren't quite right fits. So different things like that.
Interesting. See, well, not basically, but a lot of people we've talked to are just like, yes, I settled here when I was 6 years old, and maybe I didn't even leave this place. And
Yeah.
especially with it being more difficult to church shop, for lack of a better phrase. Not saying that that was exactly what's happening, but more difficult by not driving or needing rides or whatever, still managed to do that. That's
Hmm.
quite the interesting intro to, or foundation for your faith.
Yeah, my mom was very persistent. She was very outgoing
Mm-hmm.
and very bubbly, very charming. She'd had a really, really bad accident when I was 9 and shattered her ankle. And so she was pretty much disabled after that, but she still
Mm-hmm.
had a very bubbly personality. We when we moved to Pennsylvania, so we're kind of in this neighborhood. There's maybe 13 houses in the neighborhood up a hill, and there's nothing else around us. And she went door to door, knocking on everybody's door, looking to see if there was any kids our ages,
Oh,
Christians. Very introverted, so this is probably the only way I was ever going to meet anyone.
right.
But we did find a family that were Christians, and The eldest daughter was a little older than me. The youngest was a little younger than my sister, and they were the ones we would get rides with a lot to their Baptist church.
I see. I see. So how did that then evolve into a youth group experience for you? You said you bounced around some youth groups. Was it at the same rate that you were bouncing around other churches, or did you end up finding one that you stayed at?
It was about the same rate. They had small but decent youth group that I would go to, again, depending on rides.
Mm-hmm.
So I went with them for a couple years. We went to a couple other churches in the valley that were really small. And so then we would have a youth group, and it would be like me, my sister, one other person. That other person's mom was the leader. And that was our youth group.
Whoa, super tiny.
Yeah, super tiny, especially when you live with the one of the other members.
Right.
Uh, and then by my senior year, I had done See You at the Pole. We remember See You
Nice.
at the Pole.
Yes.
And one of the girls that was there was in one of my classes. She was a little bit younger. And it's like, oh, well, you're here. We started talking. And she went to the Assembly of God church. And they had a really active, fun youth group. And I started going there. So my senior year was like the one year that I was really solidly involved with the youth group,
I see.
this youth group. And yeah.
Okay. Okay. So finally, towards the end, you found
Yeah.
something.
I think when we were talking earlier, Caleb, and I was like, I wasn't a functional part of a functional youth group for long, but it was good.
Sounds like you still got the experience.
Yeah. Yeah. It was
Interesting.
it was good. Yeah.
So, what types of words would you use to describe your faith in high school, or what did faith look like for you during that time, especially with all the, moving around?
I was very serious about it. I was obnoxiously serious about it. There was a point where I was only allowed to listen to Christian music. I had a lot of restrictions on what I could read and what I could watch, which is weird to think back because I still managed to read stuff I wasn't allowed to and see stuff I wasn't allowed to. But it's part of growing up. You figure things out.
Yes.
Uh, but when my mom had had her accident, I took over a lot of the caregiving and the house cleaning and helping with my sister. Kind of grew up pretty fast
Hmm.
and had a lot of adult responsibilities. And my dad had a car accident shortly after that and had some weird medical stuff going on for a while. So it felt like a grown up and I had to have all the answers.
Hmm.
And okay, well, God was the way. I read my Bible, go to church, do everything as right as possible. It's kind of obnoxious about it.
I don't know what you're talking about. I was
Right?
not. I was obnoxious in a different way, I'm sure.
Oh.
But yeah, interesting. So that the necessity of having to caretake and grow up a little bit faster. Maybe there just wasn't a lot of room for like anything else. You're just like, hey, this is solid for everybody.
Yeah.
Let's stay attached to it. Did that kind of grow over time? Did that get changed at all once you got to that senior high or that senior year youth group? Was it like a space where maybe you didn't have to have as much responsibility because it's a little bigger and more evolved?
Yeah, I think that's a big reason why I have such good fond memories of
Hmm.
being in that youth group. Like it was fun. I got to be with people around my age and we got to run around and play basketball and be dumb kids for a little bit.
Mm-hmm. A little escape, I suppose.
Hmm. Yeah.
Good. Well, I'm glad you eventually found that one after so
Right.
much time. So yes, confident, is super important. A theme that we continue to hear. What are some of those memories then that you think of? You kind of had alluded to it a few minutes ago of like that senior year youth group. That was the one that gave you that experience that a lot of other people have had. What are some of your memories during that time, either of a teaching or activity that you still hang on to?
I I love that like we'd go roller skating and they would play a little Christian music. There was one night, and so Assembly of God is very charismatic and we
Hmm.
believe in tongues and moving of the spirit. And there was a night that everyone there had had like issues with their dads. And there was people there that weren't there that normally were always there. And just had this really powerful movement. And then a few weeks later, my mom died suddenly.
Oh,
Yeah. And so
wow.
I've always held on to that no matter how much my faith has changed since then, there was something that actually happened in that moment. And I don't know if it was God. I don't know what happened, but I was in a community space with other people being held and like prepared in a way.
I'm really sorry to hear that happened
Yeah.
so young in your life. I'm glad you also had a place that was at least reassuring for you, and maybe if that had happened earlier, maybe that spirit experience would have been different because it
Right.
wasn't, as steady.
Yeah.
So wow, that was a real blessing to have in the midst of that tragedy.
Yeah.
How about like any teachings or anything that still stick out to you? Like, was there anything? Caleb and I have talked about like memory verses and all this, all these things that were being drilled into us. Was there one thing in particular that youth group was trying to drill into you?
No.
Oh,
No, no, there was things in the regular services with the regular pastor that were kind of going on
mm-hmm.
that I did not love even at that time. That I remember those things, but I just remember a lot of acceptance from the leaders we had. I don't know, it was just a safe kind of chill space. Although we went we did a mini like conference kind of thing with another church
Mm.
in the area. And I just remember this pastor screaming at us to put our arms and hands in the air. So it's not a teaching per se, but it was this weird, like you have to act out on this in a certain way
Like during worship?
during worship. So, right,
Okay then.
yeah, I feel like all of my stories are going to come out like really disjointed here because
No,
I was like prepping and I'm like, oh, wait, this goes in this question.
we will piece this together. We'll put this puzzle together.
Sorry, Caleb.
Yes, it's Kale's gonna edit them all together so they make chronological sense. I have a memory of something similar. It's not during youth group, but I will share it because it's obviously during church. We moved back to this. Yes, it was back to the cities in 2016, and we did some church shopping for a while. There is a large mega church here called River Valley, and yeah, we tried it out. We lasted a one Sunday because, for multiple reasons, but they had the worship and the sermon and then a couple worship songs at the end. But right before the second set of worship songs, this pastor gets up there and, he's kind of this burly guy with this English accent. And he was like shaming the dudes for not raising their
Oh
hands as
gosh.
examples for everyone else. And he literally was like, Christian women prefer and love men who raise their hands during worship.
There are so many layers of
Wrong with
wrong
that.
to
Yeah,
that.
and I was like, I'm out of here.
Right.
Like,
See ya.
one of my best friends from Rochester, where we lived before, who led our small group, he was one of the most devoted Christians I've ever met.
Yeah.
He would never raise his hands in church and didn't feel comfortable doing it. And I don't understand the concept of shaming or forcing people into behavior that is certainly not like important theologically in any
Right.
regard.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. It is a suggestion. It is in the moment if God moves you. It is not something to be screamed at, especially not to woo other people.
Right, exactly. What's your motive? Like, what a great message for a youth group boy. Like, why don't you perform in worship, but really for someone else?
Uh,
So, yikes, yikes. Did you hang around there after high school? Were you involved after you graduated?
I was so and then I am disjointed because my mom didn't die until I was 19. So it wasn't my
Okay.
senior year, it was a few years later. But
Mm-hmm.
I was really just kind of lost after high school because I had been an adult for so long.
Mm.
And then I didn't really have any help getting set up with college, and I was just kind of, I guess, behind, late bloomer in certain regards socially, and like I couldn't figure out how to get funding. My dad wasn't helping me
Mm.
do the FAFSA or anything like that. So I dropped out of college. I was just going to college in town. And I I ended up in 1997 working at the job that I am still at.
Nice.
Yeah. But the where I worked was right across the street from the Assembly of God Church. So if they were having like a Friday night service, that was a Friday night service that they
Mm.
had. So sometimes I would just kind of pop in. I wasn't a leader. I just kind of just showed up and they would kind of let me. It wasn't a huge youth group. It was bigger than I was used to, but
Sure.
and I knew everybody. So when I met my husband online and emailed him for a cassette tape of his friend's band, we started
Nice.
emailing at long distance. Got married at 19 and I moved halfway across the country to Minneapolis.
Nice.
He was youth leader at the AFG church out here, and he was also going to North Central for youth ministry. So I did become a youth leader by proxy that at that point. And that was very dramatic.
That was part of the deal.
So it's almost like you've had more youth group experience post high school, but kind of like I feel like it's kind of during those college years, but you weren't going to college. So it's kind of like the like when like full on adulthood hits. You know, you kind of have that like you're out of the house, but like you're kind of still, figuring things out.
Yeah.
And so it's like it almost feels like your youth group time kind of got bumped back like 4 years, and it's like it kind of happened from like 18 to 23 instead of like
Exactly.
8th grade to 12th grade or something.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I should not have been leading anyone, much less the people they gave me. It was moving out here was a very big. I felt like I was moving to a different country. Like East Coasters are pretty blunt. They don't like somebody, they tell you they don't like you. Out
Yeah.
here, I have no idea if anybody likes me or not.
Same. I don't know if Caleb likes me. Frankly.
I don't like you at all, Scott.
Thank you. That mystery has been revealed.
There's so many Lutherans out here.
Yep.
I'd never been around Scandinavian people. It was wild.
It's still a pretty great place, but yeah, I mean,
Oh,
any move is always a shock. But yeah, and I mean specifically those some things in the culture in the Midwest that don't jive elsewhere.
Yeah, I have absolutely no complaints. I'm so glad that this is where I ended up. And I now consider myself a Minnesotan
There you go.
past couple of years. So Pennsylvania's still my heart to some degree, but
Well, we're glad you're here.
well, thanks. Glad to be here.
To put a kind of wrap up the youth group experience itself, like overall, what did you love about it?
We just had a really great group of people. Like I said, there was such a disconnect between how the youth pastor led us versus the actual church pastor, who I did not like. I found him to be very aggressive. But our youth pastor was a young married guy with 2 little kids. His wife was lovely. It comes up regularly on here, the amazing youth leaders that gave their time. One of our friends' mom was one. My neighbor, a different neighbor, who's a little older than me, was one. We made really great friends. I had friends at school and church, which was different. And that was really, really fun. And they were just, we did everything together. We spent so much time together, even outside of church. It's like somebody had a car, so to come down the valley, get everybody, and then we'd go, Perkins or something, and go be obnoxious there for a little bit.
See, Caleb, that's similar to ours. Like we had our small friend group that was high school and youth group, and like that's all we saw. You were the only people I saw.
Yeah.
Like I did not branch out. I did not have separate groups.
Yeah, I had like a sport that I was involved in that I'd have some people there, but that was about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a tiny group at school that wasn't connected, but very introverted, shy person. And who moved a lot, who moved at the worst years you can possibly move, bullied relentlessly. Like, friends are hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like if you found some at basically the right time, which I'm
yes.
glad to hear. That's really nice.
It was a really tough year, so it was really good to have some really good people. So I still talk to some of them.
There you go. We have talked about the introvert extrovert thing a few times on this podcast. Like, did that resonate with you at all? Like, were they trying to get you to like, hey, Pam, go on stage and do a silly game? And you were like, no, I want to stay here.
The pressure wasn't necessarily from there. A lot from my mom. I sometimes, looking back, I'm like, I don't think I was the kid that she had dreamed of having. Not in a bad way. It was just, I think she wanted girly girls and outgoing and then my mom wasn't like super into makeup or any of that stuff, but I think I was just a little bit too quiet, I liked climbing trees, a little bit rough around the edges. And but it actually came up more when I was a youth leader and some of the other more in the church settings. The concept of getting you out of your comfort zone. Okay, well, I'm introverted. I've been bullied. I hit puberty very hard in 4th grade. I've got a woman's body. I'm not a kid, like in any sense of anything. And I'm awkward socially. Home isn't the safest. But let's be uncomfortable all the time. Let's get you out of your comfort zones. I have only learned to be comfortable in my body like in the past 5-6 years, 10 years maybe, because there's such a high pressure to be like, well, you're not really doing God's work if you're comfortable.
Yes.
But when you're never ever comfortable in your own body or in your own life, it's not the best thing to do. I am very pro that maybe you should figure out how to relax and get rest.
That's an interesting take on that topic. I'm glad I asked that question for the very reason that statement, if you're not comfortable, you're not doing God's work. Like, it's making the assumption that at the very least everything else is fine. Or that God's just making it fine, right? And so because we have the most important thing, that salvation, that we should be comforted and ready to spread that message because everything else is fine. Like, there's a lot of kids who just need a space that's either safe, like you said, or it's not going to push them too hard because everything else is chaos.
Yeah.
Or maybe that's a little dramatic, but it's all up in the air.
No, I've been thinking a lot about that too, because I can't suss out what our financial situation was when I was growing up. Like, we had a home computer in the 80s, but like my mom would have to pray and we'd have clothes show up on the doorstep, or I remember we went through the 1995 government shutdown at Christmas and we were struggling. We were paycheck to paycheck, but we lived in this little neighborhood we were in. There was some people with some good wealth. I don't think we had that level of wealth. And then when you go further up the mountain, like we're talking, this is a former mining community. This is pretty much Appalachia. There's some deep poverty here. And I think, and then when we came out here, the church we were going to, there's a lot of wealth. And I'm like, you don't have to worry about food. And you don't have to worry about your clothes, where they're coming from, if they fit. If you don't have to worry about medical care, maybe you should be uncomfortable a little bit. But if you are literally relying on God for those things, maybe you give yourself a break.
Yeah, exactly. The basic needs, maybe more than basic needs, right? Like that, and that's for everybody to judge, right? That's not for a youth pastor to judge or a head pastor or something. That's for everyone to decide on their own. Doing these interviews, it's a new lens. I kind of see that experience through now, and getting to talk to people who are both introverted and extroverted have enlightened us on that quite a bit.
Are you guys both? Are you introverted or extroverted?
Caleb does not want to answer the question because he's introverted.
I was waiting for you. I was waiting for the extrovert to answer.
I'm a polite extrovert. No, I'm definitely. I mean, it's a spectrum, right? But like, I'm definitely lean on the extrovert side.
Okay.
My wife is not. She's definitely heavily on the introvert side. So like, we do these things sometimes where she will go and take a weekend away for herself so she can just be by herself, and then I can throw a party at the house. So to balance
Amazing.
both of those needs out, So yes, I'm the extrovert here.
Oh, good.
I'm the annoying one.
No. No, I had a feeling about Caleb because some of the things he posts, I'm like, yeah, that's same thought process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm a weird introvert in the sense that like I am introverted, but like I'm good at public speaking. Like really, like that's my job basically, is to
Okay.
lead meetings and stuff. And
hmm
I completed a speech minor in college without trying. Like literally the guy who runs the minor was like, you've taken enough speech classes that you've earned a minor. Would you like me to sign the paperwork? I already filled it out for you. I was like, sure, let's do it.
That's
And so
amazing.
like I like that sort of stuff. And I've said it a couple times, like, I'm on 2 podcasts. I want do one myself and then I help with
Right.
this one. Like I clearly don't mind the social engagement.
Right.
But yes, I tend to be it's hard having 4 children. I'll just say it. Like I'm
Yeah.
socially exhausted by about 10:30 every night. I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't want to see any of you people anymore. I love you
Right.
people more than any people on the planet. But
Yeah.
if you ask me one more question, I'm gonna go nuts.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think it's a
Yeah.
little of that.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's totally like I wish I had taken debate classes. I think I would have loved that. And I love talking one-on-one with people about like things like this. Both of my kids were very extroverted when they were younger, and I was just burned out all the
Mm-hmm.
time.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't change it for the world, but gosh.
Let's take the conversation, as it's kind of flowing into, today and how we understand ourselves as adults. How does everything compare to where your faith was at back in Pennsylvania?
Oh gosh, I was deconstructing before
It was
there was a
cool.
word for it. And my mom would have said that was backsliding.
Yep.
The closest description would have been agnostic there for a few years. And I'm in a reconstruction phase right now. I've taken everything apart, but it's very hard for me to be like, I'm not a Christian
Mm.
when that was like the biggest tie I had with my mom.
Mm.
And she grew up in extreme poverty. She grew up in extreme violence.
Mm.
Her faith genuinely gave her life. And I can't look at that, and I can't look at people who've gone through things and still hold on to faith and say that's not real.
Hmm.
So I'm kind of, yeah, I'm in a little bit of a reconstruction phase right now, but it is vastly different. I'm not telling anybody anything about God. I'm not telling anybody I don't know anything.
Right.
I'm not, preaching at anybody. I'm listening to lots of secular music and cussing.
Once you start swearing, you just that's where the backsliding starts.
Right.
It's a snowball effect from there. So, I mean, that's kind of how they made you feel in the 90s. That's
Yep.
for sure.
I didn't start cussing until like 10 years ago. So
Nice. It's kind of about the same for me.
a really difficult work situation. You could tell how bad the night was going to go based on how quickly it went to the actual cuss words.
Why do you think things changed for you then so drastically? I mean, deconstruction, reconstruction was happening early for you, like maybe a lot of things were. And, was it a certain event, or do you think it was just kind of a slow burn up to this point?
It was definitely a slow burn. I've really tried to figure this out over the past couple of years, and how did I end up here? But going to different churches, and I was listening to the podcast that you just released too, and that was really quite. I listened to it at 6 in the morning, so I don't remember anything, but it was very pertinent to where I was going with this. But we went to a non-denominational church. Everybody was like a former Catholic, so like half the sermons were against Catholics.
Oh, sure. Yes.
We go to my friend's Baptist church. Well, half their sermons are against the charismatic people, which we are one. And we had like this standing, like we agree to disagree with our friends. But it was kind of tension always there. And then I go to the Assembly of God church, and the main pastor is going on about abortion and homosexuality the whole time. Now, at that point, I didn't know anyone who was gay. However, looking back, like all my friends at high school were gay,
Hmm.
queer.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't even know myself that I was until like in my 30s. And I'm this is hard to talk about, but I don't think it's come up on the podcast yet, and I feel like it's important to talk about it. I'm like non-binary, but didn't know that for until my 40s.
Hmm.
I'm pansexual, demisexual. I don't know. It's all a very weird, fuzzy thing. I'm very, very fortunate that I found my person so young.
Hmm.
And because a lot of women in my situation who, or non-binary people, who get married young because of they feel like that's what they're supposed to do, have their kids young, end up in very abusive situations, end up
Hmm.
in unhealthy marriages, and ends up in really toxic situations. And you guys said very early on about like when you're in relationships and how you're different people at
Oh,
different times.
yep.
And that like that was such a cool thing to me and I think about it pretty regularly. Like we've been very different people at very different times. And we've always loved each other. And I feel so fortunate for that.
Hmm.
And but yeah, all of my little we had Caleb will love this. I had a little group that would meet right before homeroom and we would skank in the hallway to no ska music. We just do little dances. We are all just a bunch of weird weirdos. And nobody came out till after high school. But there was such a big thing in my brain when people started coming out, even though I didn't know where I was. If I'm supposed to bring my friends to church, I'm not bringing them to church and have them just be ripped apart from the pulpit
Hmm.
for who they are. And I was listening to Bethany's podcast today, actually, and she talked a lot about those kinds of things today, too. And it's just, you can't tell somebody else what their experience is.
Hmm.
And it shouldn't be done from the pulpit. At least, I don't think. If we are made in God's image and he doesn't make mistakes, there should be a wide range of humanity,
Hmm.
as long as nobody's hurting each other.
There was a conversation. First of all, thank you for sharing all that personal experience. We really value your willingness to do that. There was a conversation I had with my mother-in-law, I don't know, probably close to 15 years ago, and some of this stuff was coming up, right? I mean, we were definitely had the same message. We didn't, maybe in our church it wasn't being yelled about, but it was certainly portrayed as a threat, and it's coming for the kids and everything like that. My mother-in-law was like, who's an affirming person, is just like, the world isn't ready for it yet, right? Like at that time, and you could argue even right now the world isn't ready for it, obviously. It made me realize from a very privileged perspective, like a lot of change for people who are in situations that maybe require justice or require more empathy or understanding. Change for people in that regard is a very long arc, very, very long. It does not happen with one 4-year administration, one election, or one generation. It is a very long arc of change.
Right.
And, kind of maybe similar to you, it's like, what role do I have in bringing people to see Christ as things change like that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's a big change for you. So thanks for sharing it.
By the time I was figuring stuff out, it had sort of been getting safer and it was starting to it feels very dangerous to talk about it right now. And I'm like, you know what do I have to lose at this point?
You do live in Minnesota, so you'd probably be safe at least for a while.
I'm very grateful for that. And yeah, I just try to do what I can to help in other ways for other people because not everybody's so lucky. And
Hmm. Do you guys have a church home now that you're part of?
my husband is still a part of our church. I have not gone in a really long time. Um, I am very grateful for the church. I still consider myself a part of it, even though I haven't been in forever.
Hmm.
I'm very grateful for it. I don't agree with everything they have said, but they've been trying to deal with some of these things. And the big things that I love about our church is that racial reconciliation and actively helping with homelessness and food insecurity are big priorities.
Hmm.
So to me, like the kingdom of heaven is at hand. We are in the now. We are God's representatives. Then how do we feed our neighbor? How do we take care of our neighbor?
Hmm.
Not I used to worry so much about the rapture and going to heaven, and I'm like, nope, let's think about today. I already have enough anxiety. I don't need any more.
To your point about basic needs being met that we talked about earlier, like we're not going to get very far down the road of spiritual conversations if people around us are still have needs that basic needs that need to be met. So I'm with you. I live on the west side of town, but we go to church in Minneapolis, and for all the things that I do not agree with him on from time to time, look, I still bring my son there. I drove him there yesterday for youth group, and they do really good inner city ministry, and I'm really supportive of that. So it's good that you can even be at that place to understand and appreciate and participate in that.
Yeah. They changed the layout of the sanctuary and it stressed me out about it, so I haven't gone back. It's just too much sensory overload. There's like neon lights and stuff
The
like
seat
that.
you always sat in is different now.
Yep. They changed the seating arrangements.
Yeah, yeah.
And I work with the public. I'm very introverted, and my job is public facing. And our stores are busy, and it's a lot sometimes.
It can be a lot on Sunday, sure. The youth group's experience specifically, looking back on it now, was there something you just really struggled with during that time? I mean, you mentioned the head pastor, being really fire and brimstone about some things. I would assume that that's kind of part of what you might struggle with.
I think it was just a lot of my own things, just socially awkward and introverted when I was going to the Baptist youth group, and all the kids were older, had more money. I think I got put into some weird situations where like I was writing these things out, and I'm like, was I the butt of the joke? Like,
Oh.
and I'm not 100% sure to say that, but I'm also like, I wasn't having a good time.
You're not 100% sure you weren't either, though.
Right. Like, because it could go either way. Like, I had my friend tried to get me to hit on this guy for like no reason, which I was like 2 years younger than him. And then she ended up dating him like long term. And it was just, why did I go along with that?
Hmm.
Like, there was no reason for that. I made a fool of myself.
What are friends for?
Right? Like,
Especially high school ones.
yes, right. We were, yeah. So,
Interesting.
yeah.
Interesting.
You think everybody else has it all together, though, and you're all just stupid kids. Like,
It's through these conversations, I continue, for as much as I might look back and be like, ugh, I struggle with this or this. They are trying to help kids through a difficult time, and it's really not on them to change everybody or whatever. I mean, it's not a magic pill you take and everything suddenly's fine. So yeah, we were all kind of stupid kids, and
yep.
we've talked about it on other episodes. Like, you don't walk through the door of youth group and just become a different person.
Right.
You're still a kid, you're still a teenager. So at least they were there during some volatile years. But what do you think your youth group self, I'll use that phrase because you went to youth group a little bit later, would say to your current self and vice versa? Like, what would that conversation sound, or what sound like, or what would it be like?
Well, she'd be horrified. She'd be so horrified. Yeah, it's so hard I would tell myself to try to chill out just a little bit. There's something Caleb knows about this because last time we talked, but my husband got laid off last summer, and there was writing on the wall. There was a whole bunch of things the year before. They wanted him to return to office and go to Milwaukee 3 days a week. Kind of getting laid off was kind of a blessing. But
Yikes.
I remember all the conversations we'd have was just be like, you know what? We have a lot of options. And I'm like, I don't think there's any right or wrong answers. We have a lot of options that there's going to be good things and bad things to all of them. And that is the thing that I would tell my former self, and just be like, stop obsessing about God's will, and just be like, it is okay to make decisions and make choices. And I mean, there's a lot riding on it when you're a kid and
Yeah.
18, but that's been such a great lesson to learn and has helped. We're going to move forward. We're going to live in the moment a little bit and trust the process. I don't think my younger self would have had any good advice for me.
No. That's too bad. Well, then.
Maybe to not stop roller skating. Oh no. My younger self, because I misread the question, which is I sometimes I read things really fast and then I respond quickly and I did not read the question at all. But what would your high school self tell your 42-year-old self? Well, I turned 42 in 2020. So my high school self would tell my 2020 self, do not read all the books about pandemics. This is not going to benefit you in any way.
Oh boy.
For when you live through it, it's
Yes.
going to be awful.
Yeah. That's funny. Yeah, again, I appreciate the honesty there. What you said about God's will is such a. It felt like during the '90s, during youth group, that was something that like it almost felt like if you tried hard enough, you would find it,
Yeah.
or you would get a really strong indication of what you should do. Whereas maybe that's more along the lines of make those decisions, think about them, don't just do it,
Right.
shoot from the hip. But as you make those decisions, God will be with you in them and guide you through them. I mean, maybe it's a little bit of more of an adult understanding of everything. But man, you brought that up and I'm like, yes,
Yep.
I was so bent on trying to pray hard enough and think about it hard enough about where God wanted me to go to school and my major and all this kind of stuff. And it was pretty intense pressure to find that. Because what if you made the wrong choice?
Right. That's your whole life.
Yeah.
And that's we were long distance. Like I do not like telling like it's a meet cute story up until this point. He's down the hall. And we had talked, we're like, we're gonna meet in person and we're just gonna know if we're supposed to get married. And you're gonna know. I told him, you're gonna know. And then he said, yes, we're supposed to get married. That's how we got engaged.
Nice.
I would never tell
Yes.
anybody else to ever do that. Oh my gosh. And like, I'm very fortunate it worked out.
Yeah.
Was this at the time where I Kissed Dating Goodbye had already come out? I mean, was that an influence on this? Because it feels
Yes.
a little like that, right?
Yeah,
This
good
idea
call,
that, like,
Caleb.
Yes.
Good call.
You don't need to actually be together. It's like just, because that sort of feels a little like. So was that an influence on it?
Yeah. Oh, 100%. And that's something I was going to talk about, just how intense purity culture was back then. Yeah, I Kissed Dating. I don't think I ever read it, but it was enough in the
Ether.
700 Club was on TV all the time. We had TV and we always had cable. So we always had access. Like Pat Robertson's voice is in my head. And not a good thing.
Yeah, this is free therapy, but we're not that good at it.
No, I'm like, I legitimately need to go back to therapy and work through some of the stuff that's going on. Yeah, and like I was way more hardcore about it than my family was. Not that I was encouraged to be promiscuous or dating a lot, but like I had a boyfriend in 11th grade. Oh, I can only date this guy if we are going to get married.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm having this super serious relationship when I'm not mentally capable of having such a serious relationship. Dodged a bullet with that guy when I broke up with him, but then I'm glad I escaped like the purity ring thing.
Mm-hmm.
But True Love Waits, I think, started like 1994.
Yeah.
There was such a huge push. But again, introvert who doesn't like to be touched.
Yeah.
I could have chilled out just a little bit.
It's hard. There's a lot of pressure to be a certain way.
But then there was clearly a pressure to like I remember, Scott, I swear we were told like date to marry.
Oh.
Like I feel like that came up,
yeah.
and we were both dating people in high school and and so it's just that is an interesting, especially now that I have teenagers, we've had much different conversations about dating, that it's like my feeling is just like, hey, you're so young. Like I've gone back to that well of the you'll be a different person every 5 years. Like that has really become a thing in my life. I'm really thankful. That's a Tim Keller thing. I'm really thankful for it because it really does have that. I kind of wish that was taught to youth group kids instead of like, hey, date to marry. Like, yeah, that's a good principle in philosophy, I think. Like it's taking it seriously and being mindful. But I think it'd be more important to tell kids like, yeah, date to marry, but also, hey, here's this deal. Every 5 years, you're going to be like a different person. And so, maybe wait till you hit that stride, 18-year-old self, not as good as 23-year-old self for like 99% of us. Like, just wait till you hit that. It's funny. You both are pretty married. I mean, Scott, you weren't crazy young, but you guys started dating in college, and so like you guys have both like done the married young, but still like it's worked out really well, and so it's you're both in that camp, which is good.
Yeah. So 1994, I was just reading this article. I think it's from 96. Poor Lou is not that much older than me. And then most of the guys, poor Lou, were married by the time I was senior in high school. I think they're like 4 years older than me.
Yeah.
I think Aaron already had a kid. I don't know about Jesse. I know Nick is still with his wife, but the other two have divorced and remarried.
Yeah.
And my friend from the neighborhood, she got married a year before I did. She was pregnant at my wedding. Like, she was only a year older than me.
Yeah.
Well, we also lived in a very Catholic area. We were not Catholic, but you really can't get away from...
It was still in the culture a little bit.
It was very much. And like, I remember being at the Baptist church and there was one of the leaders' wives was there, very pregnant. And this is where I learned the term quiverful. And I'm like, how did I figure out this word? And I just remember her sitting there so pregnant and just looking so miserable. And I'm like, oh, that looks horrible.
Look, Caleb, we dodged some of that because, that's definitely a little bit more kind of in mountains in the West too. But like, we didn't get to that quiverful thing. And I learned about that later on.
We didn't? I mean, I went to Bethlehem Baptist. Like
Well,
that was my wife attended a like women's group that's what the name of it was when we were at Bethlehem. So I think it did get here.
I'm saying not in high school.
Yeah, definitely not in high school.
Yeah.
But I think you could have found it in high school because I know plenty of people who I went to church with who started getting their quivers full when I was in high school because they had 18-year-olds when and they had 18-year-olds and then I didn't get married till I didn't have my first kid till I was 28.
Oh
and so like
jealous.
My wife had our kid. But like we had people who would like they had 18-year-olds and they were also like dedicating their 10th child. Yeah. So like I think that quiverful thing was there. We just didn't have it at our church in the evangelical free suburban evangelical free church.
Yeah. Little armies of little Christians.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know how much it crosses over different sects and different SECTS and cults and things like that, because it does seem to show up in different areas with that. But yeah, you were supposed to get married and have a bunch of kids. And
yeah.
A few of these topics that we've brought up, finding a spouse, knowing God's will, like it just kind of brings it back to we're being taught very serious, hefty, heavy things. Being 16, 17, 18 is hard enough. Pam, that time of your life for you was really difficult. You had a lot more responsibilities. Like to add on to that, like make sure the person you're dating you're going to also marry. How are you supposed to know?
Right.
And for the most part, I think intentions were good, but maybe that's part of some of the scaling back that's happened. We've talked about that with some of the games and some of the teachings and stuff. Maybe that's kind of scaled back a little bit. They're like, let's not put so much on a 16-year-old to pressure them to find a spouse right now, or just not date at all. Like,
Right. What if we, give them the tools they need to make good choices,
right.
Give them whatever they need for that, and keep open conversations. Make sure, my sex ed was I was given a James Dobson book.
Mm-hmm.
And so still dealing with that too.
Again,
but
we can't unpack that. We're just podcasters, but yes,
you would not take my offer for coffee today. So. There was a reason.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I'm only 46. I have a 24-year-old. I have a 22-year-old. That's what you did.
That's what you did.
Yeah. Yep. And we knew lots of people in our age group. Like it wasn't unusual.
Yeah.
And I don't know how much that your brain isn't fully developed by 25, but like maybe wait till you're 25.
Well, more and more people are. I mean, it's just the reality of it. More and more women are going to college and having careers, as they should, because they are talented and can perform just as well. Sorry, don't want to get too far on that tangent. But a lot of people are doing that. And so they're naturally waiting to have kids. My wife works at the university. She works in a lab. She's watching these students go through their PhD programs. Like, yeah, once that's finished, then I'll settle down or whatever. I mean, rightfully so. People are putting that off. I mean, my son was born when I was 31, so it was, that even farther down the road. So yeah, for good reason, and it's just different. And there are some parts of our youth group experience that would have been like, that's not God's will. That's not how God wanted things, right? You figure it out early on. Wife, you stay home, you raise all the kids. Dad, you find a job. Like, it's just not, culture isn't that simple anymore. And I'm glad a lot of Christianity has changed with it.
And financially, I don't think a lot of these young people can do it either.
Yeah,
It's just
true.
everything is so expensive right now.
Well, Pam, you spent a lot of time with us. We really appreciate this conversation. I'll ask a couple more questions and we can make any other comments that we'd like. I know that you kind of got connected with Caleb and by extension this podcast just through the love of music, that sort of thing. Is there any form of like Christian media, books, teachers, authors, that sort of thing, music included, that you just kind of approach differently now? Or is there something you're still listening to or still reading? Obviously not James Dobson, but like, is there someone that you're still reading or that still holds a special place for you in kind of that Christian entertainment world?
I've revisited almost all of my favorite Christian bands because there was a long time when I was deconstructing, like I couldn't listen to Poor Old Lou. They were my absolute favorite band, and being able to talk to Caleb and listening to the anniversary album show, like I've gotten to fall back in love with a lot of that music that I hadn't, like I always had Starflyer 59 and never gave up on that. A couple things like Sixpence None the Richer.
Mm-hmm.
And we ended up leaving the Assembly of God Church and going to Woodland Hills. And pastor's Dr. Greg Boyd, there were so many sermons of his that I don't agree with him on everything, but I remember very early on when we started going there was a sermon just talking about the women of the Bible and how important they were. And it was like the first time I'd ever felt seen
Yep.
in a sermon, and that I had a role, because the previous church, like we would get signed up for things without anybody telling us, and nobody was there for us when the hard stuff happened. And we go to this church and they're warm and inviting, and I feel seen from the sermons. So it was a very good choice for us to move to Woodland Hills. I'm very glad that we did that.
Mm-hmm.
Pastor Boyd's work has been hugely influential.
Is he still there?
Mm-hmm.
Nice. Yeah, he talked himself out of some jobs and some teaching positions and things for taking a stance on some issues very early on that now are not so controversial. So
yep. Right about when we went there, half the church left for when Myth of the Christian Nation came out.
Yeah.
But that was actually a huge part why we left the other church we were going to, because we went there one day. They were supposed to have some local politicians come in, and then they had them all stand up. They were all Republican politicians. And I already had a number of issues, and that was like my absolute breaking point. I'm like, this stuff needs to stay out of the church. This is not why I'm at church. I didn't know he was going to do all that. And I had a lot of questions. I would email with him and he would email me back, and we had a couple really good discussions, and like forever grateful for that.
Mm-hmm. That's good. Well, in general, how do you think your 90s youth group experience contributes to the person you are today?
With the experiences, such negative experiences we had at the Assembly of God Church, I can think back to that senior year that I had friends, we had fun, we saw Carmen at the Bloomsburg Fair.
Yeah.
Together.
Yes.
R.I.P. Carmen.
Right. And like we had gone to all these different churches, and when my mom died, like we were not a member of any of the churches. People from every single church came and like brought us food. And the church, the Assembly of God Church, she had never even gone to. It was just me and my sister, and the amount of people that showed up from that church to support us and be there. It's a big reason why I cannot fully go with that agnostic label. Like it's so tied in with that. Like, this is the body, this is the church, no matter what, we are supposed to be there for each other. in time of need, in time of joy.
That's a great answer. It's those things that they do out of service that I think really stick with people. So I'm glad, again, that they kind of had that community at that time for you. Last but not least, you listened to many episodes.
Hey, before you do last but not least. So, sorry, I'm going to jump in. So you've talked a little bit about like some of the baggage and like deconstruction, but then you made the comment of like reconstruction. Was there something that was like, I want to even attempt this? Like, was there something that happened or something that kind of inspired that? Like, because even if it doesn't land or it doesn't go where you think it might go, was there something that even just, because I think a lot of people, they kind of deconstruct or they leave the faith and then it's like, I'm just done with it. And there's no, clearly you just mentioned you're hanging on to it a little bit. Yeah. There's things that won't let you go. But is there anything that's actually like, was there something that happened that kind of actually sparked the like, all right, I want to at least re-engage in the topic, even if it doesn't bring me back into a church setting?
Well, it kind of started 2 or 3 years ago. We started listening to all of our vinyl in alphabetical order. And like, I forgot we had a lot of this stuff, and re-listening to music, talking to you, Twitter being the hot mess it is. And I will say, I hope you guys can take the compliment as it is, hearing two cis white guys who've been in the church forever, being so open, who sound like they've done the work. I don't have this experience with men a lot. And it's been very refreshing and very healing to hear you guys talk through all of this. So it has been a big part of this podcast. Like, oh yeah, there was some really, really good things from the faith. And I miss some things from church. I think I would prefer a more like liturgical, symbolic experience for my church going, which my husband cannot do. And that's fine. And, again, we were in a situation where we needed help. The church was there for us this past year. I'm not even going. Like, here we are. And so revisiting a lot of the old songs that used to just hurt so much to hear again, I'm like, you know what? I can think about these words in a different way. I tried to read the Ronnie Martin, Nathan Schrader Advent books this year, and I couldn't, but I was like, okay, we're getting a little bit closer to maybe getting somewhere. Maybe there's a different Advent book out there.
Yeah.
It's not quite what I need, but I miss doing Advent. I miss some of the, I still pray. I don't know what I think is out there, but like I'll get mad at a customer and I'll be like, God bless them. Forgive me for these thoughts.
Right.
Yeah.
Forgive me for the swear words I'm about to use.
Right? It's like go in the back room and drop a bunch of F-bombs.
I did not know our podcast was going to come up in that answer. That was not a plan.
No,
No, but then every
Now we owe you money, Pam.
No, but it's been really, really delightful, and I'm not as involved with the CCM music community because like Caleb and I have talked about the Venn diagrams of interest in music, and mine do not veer super CCM, so I'm kind of on the outskirts of that a little bit, but it's been really great to see some of the conversations happening online. Like, we're adults now, we're grown adults. We can have these conversations.
I think when it's similar to you, like my journey was easier to start to get away from some of the anger and some of the deconstruction when you find that other people are like going through the same stuff, and it's a little more normalized than we think and we realize. And there are lots of people out there. Some of them don't go to church, some of them still do, some have found different churches, and it's like, yeah, okay, I'm not an outlier here, right? Because almost the youth group experience in the 90s, we were taught that people like us were the outlier. And it's so you're wrestling with your youth group self and that youth group mentality. But once you realize, like, no, a lot of people have gone through this, and it's not just a trend because it's a trend. It's happening because people are coming to terms with some of the realities of that experience. So I'm glad that we could be a part of that, and I'm really honored that you would even say that, like you said. So now I have to ask this really stupid question to end it. Caleb. Jeez. Sorry. No, you've those were great questions. I'm a terrible host for not asking them. Do you have any memories of really audacious, crazy games
I don't think
events
you've
that
ever
you
used
played.
audacious to describe this question, but I like that. Audacious, gross. I like when you throw semi-legal in there when you ask this last question.
Yeah.
That's my favorite one.
Borderline illegal.
Borderline illegal. People are like, no.
Well, our kidnapping,
Yeah,
Caleb,
we
was
had one.
borderline illegal.
Still like kidnapping.
It was,
No,
it was the best.
I had some wild times, but like I remember we did a progressive dinner when I was 13, and I haven't heard any progressive dinners come up other than one episode where people went and got fast food and then threw up everywhere.
You're right.
We went to different houses through the mountains and had like spaghetti. So, I'm just moving here. I've just met the two other 13-year-olds. We're the little kids of this group, just running around the table, just feral.
Mm-hmm.
Like my favorite memory. So I got to be a kid. And I'm still friends with one of the guys. And he was a good high school buddy later. And this house had guinea pigs. We got to play with guinea pigs, run around the table. But yeah, no, we didn't do anything super abnormal, I don't think. There was weirder things when we were leaders, but nothing like kidnapping. I think you guys win that one.
Well, this is not a game to win or lose. I don't know if I'd want to.
I mean, everything can be a game to win or lose. You try hard enough.
It almost feels like we've had a couple of people who are like closer to the Bible Belt, and like the weird games were just less of a thing. And so it almost feels like you're, rural Pennsylvania, that experience almost slides in closer with maybe some of the Bible Belt, where it was like, oh, we don't have to worry about getting kids to come here because this is just, what else are you going to do on a Wednesday night?
Well, exactly.
So it just feels like maybe it's that cultural difference again.
Yeah. The towns in Pennsylvania have a couple churches and a couple bars. Like those are your choices. Mm-hmm. And also it's a lot of poverty. So you can't buy a lot of things to eat or,
destroy.
Yeah, waste money on some of that stuff,
But again, I was only there for 1 year. I never went like on a retreat with that church. I'd gone on one with the other one when I was trying to woo my friend's interest. And we went to a lake, and like there was a little like amusement park and stuff, and you had to drive for a while to get to a lake in Pennsylvania. It's not like here where, you walk the wrong way, you fall in.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Pam, thank you very much for your honesty and your time and sharing that story with us. I really enjoyed getting to know you a little bit more, especially being a listener. And ever think we'd ever get to this point, like our listeners want to talk to us. So it's been really cool to get to know you that way, because we've interacted online a little bit too. And thanks for supporting us, and we're super happy that we can give back some way. So love to keep talking with you in a different capacity.
Yeah, it was really, really great. It's been incredibly healing. Not joking that this has been some serious therapy for me. And last year was an absolute show. And it was a really bright light to have something to look forward to. And I'm very grateful for that.
Anyway, Pam, thank you very much for joining us. Really appreciate this conversation. Thank you very much for listening and contributing. It's been great. So really great to meet you.
Yeah, it's good to see you for the first time.
Right.
So, always good to hang out with Caleb.
Yeah.
I'm always around.
Yeah.
Unless I'm picking up my kid and I'm late for this.
So, all right. Awesome. Well, thanks, Pam. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks again for listening to this episode of I Survived Youth Group in the 90s. We hope you enjoyed it. Once again, we do want to say thanks to Pam for being a loyal listener and for joining us to share her youth group experience and how that experience has stuck with her, even as her faith has changed and grown and in adulthood. So thanks, Pam, for hanging on and talking with us. We really appreciate it. Let us know what you thought about this show or any of our other shows. You can find us on Twitter at the handle @SurviveYG. We're not super active there, but that is a way to get a hold of us. You can also email us at isurvivedyouthgroup@gmail.com. Again, isurvivedyouthgroup@gmail.com. If you're interested in being on the show, let us know. You can reach out to us at either of those places. Again, you don't have to have attended our youth group, but if you have your own youth group experience that you'd like to share from the 90s or the 2000s, we'd love to connect. Please subscribe and share the podcast. If you're so inclined, leave a rating or a review. If you enjoyed this show, you might also enjoy the other podcast I do. It's called the Album Anniversary Podcast. Over the last couple of years, I've researched and documented the release date of thousands of albums. Throughout the week, I post about them on social media. We've had a couple different formats on the show, but it's a chance to sit down and talk with somebody about one of these albums that I've documented and, just talk about why we love it, why it's important to us. Once again, that is called the Album Anniversary Podcast. The music at the beginning and the end of this show is the instrumental version of the song Positive Charge by the artist Dread Pirate Roberts. Thanks again, and we will talk to you soon.
Also, Caleb, Scott and I are going to do Picture of the Eighth Wonder next year by Poor Lou for your album anniversary podcast.
We already did it. Me and Scott did it last year.
No, we're doing it next year.
You're going to do it again?
You're going to do it again with both of us.
Okay.
I've decided.
I haven't made my spreadsheet for 2026.
Well, I got
to get through 2025.
Yeah.
I'm helping you right now.
Get that on the books. I'll keep talking about it. I'll repeat what I said.
We just play a tape. We said this. Was that right?
Did I forget that happened completely? Yes, because I don't remember anything from the past 5 years.
It was like pretty early on last year because I didn't have a microphone or anything. It was like
it was before spring. I kind of had figured out the format of the show. So it's one of my first ones where I was just because like when I started the show, we can cut all this because nobody's gonna care. But when I started the show, I was like talking about a week. I was like talking about every album anniversary I posted on the internet for that entire week. So it was like an hour of me like jabbering on by myself. And I was like, oh, it's better when guests join. So then like Brock tried to join the show, but it was like he talked to me for like 10 minutes and then I had to like cut it into the show. And I was like, this is so much effort. And to try and get a guest on when I was never like more than a week. Like right now I'm almost a month out ahead.
Yeah.
And so it's like, that's where I want to be. And so like, yeah, I just couldn't do it. And so that was one of the first ones where I was like, oh, this is a better way of doing this. Let's just talk to one person about one album. I should do more of these. And that's when that was one of the inspirations for switching the show entirely. So yeah.
I was about to fight you guys the other night when you did a whole ranking of Poor Lou albums without me.
That was very impromptu. That was very off the cuff.
You were trying to get me to come on that day too, and I was like, "Oh,
that's right."
I actually made plans.
Yeah, only took us 2 hours.
2 hours. That's right.
I noticed the stream because we streamed it on both of our both the youth group account and the album anniversary account. Scott, like, because I hung up mine, so mine's only an hour. Where yours is like 2 hours. I was looking at it today and I was like, oh, that first hour is embarrassing. Oh my gosh.
Because you were testing it out of mine.
I couldn't get anything to work. I was like, oh.
Oh no. So, I know I started listening to it probably the longest one.
Yeah.
Well, let me listen to it and see what your tiers are before you delete it.
Yeah.
Well, I put it out. It's on my feed, just the audio. If you go to the album anniversary podcast, you can just listen to the slightly condensed version. And it's just the audio. You don't have to watch us fumble with it.
But it's funny.
It was pretty hilarious. So